So the weekend just gone in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, saw Anthony Joshua go one better than Tyson Fury was able to, not only staying on his feet, but managing to completely dismantle your boy, Francis Ngannou. Was it a hard watch for you?
Oh, do you know what it is? It wasn't too hard because I knew, like, logically that was entirely possible, and I knew with Francis's come forward style it could be a recipe for disaster. But the day after, it popped up on my feed an old video I'd done with Francis, and it goes, "True Geordie gets emotional listening to Francis Ngannou's story," and it was like me just getting like teary-eyed, and I was like, started all over again, hasn't it? But I since then I had a little chat with a mate of mine who spoke to Ben Davison on the way back over from Saudi, and apparently Ben was like, he never had a chance. But he didn't mean this in a nasty way. He was just like, we knew exactly what he did and when he did it, and we knew exactly how to get his hand to drop in order to expose that gap, and that's why they were working on that exact shot before they went out there. And levels to the game, mate. And I'm happy for AJ, and I'm not really sure what happens next with Francis. I did have a chat with him about that, and I've just done a little video there about basically.
Who did you have a chat with?
A friend of Francis, sort of thing. And I was talking to him about what I would do if I was Francis. And as mental as it might sound, I just feel like he's done everything he needs to do in MMA. He might as well have one more fucking bang at the boxing. Yeah, and I actually think he should fight Deontay Wilder. And that might sound mental because he's just been sparkled by one of the best long-range strikers in boxing. And Deontay is probably the other one who's good at that exact same thing. But Deontay's weaknesses for me is being in there with a big strong man who can wrestle, who can lean on him, who can rough him up on the inside. And we've seen that as good as Fury is at that, you could argue Francis at that one thing might be better. And if you do manage to take him on that in that fight and execute that game plan and get the win, you then, if Fury does lose against Usyk, you have the rematch with Fury. And I'm thinking of Francis Ngannou at 37 years old, as much as some people will say, like Carl Froch has, he should never box again. If you're 37 and you've already achieved everything you need to in MMA, and you've got a chance of some paydays left, why not fucking go and try and grab them? Like, what else are you going to do in life? You know, you got the chance of making 20 million before your next 3 years is over. I would try if I was him. Like,
I'd completely agree with you, mate. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there with that sort of path for the rest of his career now. Because if you go back into MMA, you're not gonna be earning the same sort of money, especially if it's the PFL. I'm not too sure, but if you went back into the UFC now, and also like
the PFL, you'll get, let's say, you might get a nice cash sum, right? Yeah. But the reality is, if you fight Deontay Wilder and then Tyson Fury, you have to risk it. It's all a gamble. You're going to make more money than any other fights that you can ever have if you're Francis.
You know where you've like as well. If I'm Francis Ngannou, right, I've gone off. I have put the hard work in and took my licks to be able to further myself, to make myself way more of a name even than I was, and to diversify myself into a different combat sport audience. I don't really then want to go back and do all of that to make a shitload of money for a guy who slated me and said, Francis is done with hard fights. He wants easier fights.
It would be in the PFL, but this is the thing. Let's say he goes in the PFL for less money. You can still get knocked out in the PFL. Yep. So you're taking massive risks either way. One, which is going to pay you a fuck ton more. And if that roll of the dice with Deontay Wilder comes off, who Deontay Wilder has a clear way to beat him, and you might actually have the tools to do that, you might as well fucking try. And look, one of the other reasons I would do it is right now Francis is garbage in the eyes of a lot of people because he lost that fight, and it's as if the Fury fight never happened. So I kind of feel like, well, if people think you're that anyway and you get knocked out by Deontay Wilder, well then fuck it. You know, what's the big deal? You've already been knocked out. One more knockout, as shit as it would feel, and as much as I'd worry about his head, he's never been knocked out before this. I think it's worth a go, but...
And what about if you're Wilder? Is that a lucrative fight? Bottom line is money talks. So if it pays enough, it will be a lucrative fight. Yeah. But in terms of coming up against a former Fury and AJ opponent, there's a big gulf in the differences against how, in terms of how he performed against either one. Deontay Wilder, is he going to have a bit of a thing of like, I need to get him out of there in a round to better AJ? Or is it just, no, take the money, do what you do?
Well, the reason Wilder should take the fight, if it's offered, is for Wilder, who the fuck else are you going to fight? Parker has just schooled you. And really, you could argue Parker's performance against Wilder was even better than Fury's.
Yeah.
Because he came out untouched and he put a beating on him, essentially. It wasn't anywhere near as brutal as the way Fury finished him, but obviously he didn't get dropped or anything. So Wilder also needs to rediscover his killer instinct. They both have big points to prove, which makes it an ideal scenario for me.
I think what else is intriguing about that fight, and I hadn't really thought about it much until you brought it up there, but
I'm clever.
Another thing that's intriguing about that fight is it's two guys that now when we're doing a top 10 of the heavyweight division, we're looking at and we're unsure whether either of them would be in there. If so, where would they be? But they're also two guys that no matter who is wearing the top 10 heavyweight division, on their day, they can beat anyone. Well, Deontay Wilder can turn anyone's lights off on their day.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Like, this knockout chaos, unfortunately, AJ is so well-rounded and has the power. But we all know Wilder's a bit of a one-trick pony. Francis is raw as fuck.
Tell you what, so when it works, though, when it worked, it is one fucking hell of a trick.
Mate, it's the best trick in the fucking game. Don't get me wrong. But equally, they've both got massive gaping holes in their boxing game. And look, Wilder has a lot more experience, but even still, like Teddy Atlas said not long ago after watching Fury versus Ngannou's a better natural boxer than Wilder is. So, look, I'm not saying that that's the case, but that was Teddy Atlas's fucking words, and he apparently is one of the smartest blokes in boxing. So I think it's worth making. But what do you reckon about the rest of the division?
I think that there's a serious chat that we need to have now about the top three in this heavyweight division. I think when we look at best of the rest, there's always been a few guys in contention. Most recently, the whole best of the rest, I would say, would have probably been between Hrgovic, Yang and Parker. And at the minute, on a bit of recency bias, we're looking at that and we're thinking, right, okay, Joseph Parker. But the top three, right? If I had have asked you every year, it sort of changes. In fact, every sort of fight that any of them have, it changes. But I would say for the last 3, maybe 4 years, we would have all agreed that AJ was number 3 there, wouldn't we? Whether you put Usyk or Fury top, we'd have all probably agreed that AJ was number 3 in that sort of in that top 3 landscape at the moment. Have you moved him up from 3?
I've 100% moved him up. I think the thing that is important to remember is when your fighters turn 35, the recency of fights is a lot more important. When you're in your 20s, mid-20s to 30, a few years isn't a great deal of change in your body, in your athleticism. But look, in when you're 35 to 40, the last few years are a lot more important than what happened 10 years ago or 7, 8 years ago. You have to look at the last few years. And for me, that's where I'm looking and getting my data from, because once upon a time, I would have absolutely picked Fury to beat AJ. But now, with the way Fury has been performing, he's had multiple close fights in the last few years. And AJ, on the other hand, other than Usyk, has been perfect. And Usyk has been perfect. So based on that, I'd probably lean towards AJ being number 2 now, and being able to beat Fury. Officially, I can't say that. Fury's got a title, and therefore they're going to have the undisputed fight. And I think Usyk's going to win that, and then we've got the conversation a bit more clear. But if we're looking lately, no one's even given Usyk a close fight. Fury had the draw with Wilder. He then went really close with Wilder, getting dropped twice and looking in a bad spot. Didn't look great until the knockout against White. To be fair, you can make the same argument about the White fight that you can make about the Helenius fight for AJ.
Yeah.
Neither of them look great. They got the knockout. But these last 2 fights from AJ have just sent him into another place for me. And I do put a lot of that into Ben Davidson's coaching. I think this guy is a great coach, and mentally he's got AJ firing on all cylinders.
I don't think you can emphasise enough the point you made about activity there, man. Like, who are the 2 most on-form heavyweights at the moment? we'd probably both say Anthony Joshua and Joseph Parker.
Yeah, outside of the champ.
Who are the most two active heavyweights at the moment? In fact, barring the answer to that, again, is Anthony Joshua and Joseph Parker. Look at the amount of fights they've had recently.
And I think it's getting the best out of them.
Do you know, this might surprise you a little bit. Out of those top three, right, Usyk's the least active.
And that's not his fault, though.
It's not his fault, is it? It's harsh to label that.
I think he'd want to be active like that.
100%. He's had 5 fights in 5 years since turning or moving up to heavyweight, I should say. I think Fury's had 6 or 7 in 5 years, and I think AJ leads it in 8 in 5 years. But I think that it's very, very hard for us at the minute to definitively say who's on top at the moment. So if we take Usyk to one side and we compare the last 4 fights, and you sort of went into it there when you said about the Helenius fight. For me personally, I think that Fury's win against Dillian Whyte was more impressive than AJ's win against Helenius. I think you can look at the stoppages in both of them. Came around similar times, albeit around either side. And maybe you could credit it for not too much going on until that point. I actually think that Fury was very much in control of the Dillian Whyte fight. I know from speaking to you before, you've sort of said you were a little bit disappointed in Whyte's intensity in that fight in terms of how he came out in his performance. If I'm being
I think I want to make sure that I'm not being overly critical on Fury, because I love to give him a fucking kicking when he's down sometimes. Not in a bad way, but just sometimes people need humbling, and I think he's definitely needed it. But if I'm being really brutally honest, I think he is a different level to Dillian Whyte, and he benefited in a similar way that AJ probably benefited when he went in there with Wallen, in that he'd sparred Dillian Whyte before. He knew he would be in cruise control in that fight, and he set the uppercut up perfectly. But I didn't think Fury looked as good as I've seen Fury in that fight. He just did the job nicely.
So when we're comparing to the argument you've just made there, we can level that exact same argument at AJ with Otto Wallin.
I think that there's
sparred and fought
I
twice.
think that does play a role in how you're going to perform in the fight. But what I would say is, athletically, Tyson Fury against Dillian Whyte looked slower than I've seen him. His movement in his legs, he didn't look in great shape. I don't think his jabs were particularly authoritative, and it just he was going through the motions. Whereas when AJ was in there with Wallen, he looked so much more explosive and fitter than Fury. So when those punches were landing, you were like, whoa! I wasn't doing that at any point for Fury, and look, that's part of just athletic advantage. But it's also me looking at Fury, in my opinion, slowing down. But being able to get away with that against a Dillian Whyte who is not a championship level fighter, in my opinion.
Should it surprise us that AJ looks more explosive? Because I agree, AJ does look more explosive, especially at the second than Tyson Fury. When you look back on their career, Tyson Fury, 70% stoppage ratio. AJ, 90% stoppage ratio. When you look at mutual opponents they fought, should it be something that massively surprises us?
No, it's not surprising. I think it's more just me looking at how they're aging. And when I'm looking at, as athletes, once upon a time, I would look at Fury and go, you're the mover boxer, you're light on your feet, especially for a big man. AJ is the puncher boxer, more of a puncher than a boxer, but overall level, I'd probably lean towards Fury because he's technically better, he's mentally a very clever fighter. I think the holes that needed filling in AJ's game in his boxing IQ and mental strength are coming on, and AJ is maintaining his fitness as well as his boxing IQ coming on, whereas Fury's fitness levels are on the decline and his movement is on the decline, which is something he pulled from. And somewhere along the way, because he got into this I am a puncher thing, he allowed himself to put the weight on, he allowed himself to not worry about his fitness levels as much, which resulted in the Francis Ngannou fight. But I think the signs were there when he was doing the rounds with Whyte, when he was doing the rounds with Chisora, that he is on the decline a little, whereas AJ, for me, is actually looking like he's improving right now. So that's why I'm leaning towards AJ.
Can that decline that you're on about, can that be reversed? Because it's very easy to link age to it, and that can definitely be done. But there are plenty of fighters, even that we would link with age being on a decline, that have turned things around recently. And when you say something like fitness, which I'd agree with you, by the way, it's a physical attribute. It is something that, albeit gets harder with age, it is something you can improve on. And I do think that...
Well, he looks better now, doesn't he?
He does look better.
I think Ngannou has absolutely put the shits up him.
Yeah.
It was a humiliating moment, and he's definitely working harder. Now all of his Instagram video stories are just him grafting away, which I'm happy for. Like, I want to see the best Fury. I don't want Usyk to run rings around Fury and us to look at Fury and be like, well, if it had been the real Fury, maybe we would have seen a real fight. But that being said, we'll never know until we see him in there with Usyk. But what I'm speculating on is, as a big man myself, knowing I carry weight better than Tyson Fury does. Tyson Fury is not a big, strong, broad man. He's an upright, skinny bloke who happens to have put a load of weight on because of his lifestyle choices. It's not like he's been building himself up in the gym. I watch him in the gym lifting weights. It's not impressive in any way. I'd lift way more than this guy. He's not built to be a big man. He did that to himself. And the problem is when you're carrying 20 stone around, when you really aren't a 20 stone man, I don't know what deterioration that's done on his hips, on his knees, on his ankles, all of his joints. And I don't know if even after he loses that weight, if the level, because when they say the legs have gone, if those legs will come back and we'll see the footwork, or if there's permanent damage where age and deterioration will have slowed him down. It might have.
I think one thing that I always try and steer away from, and I'm not accusing you of this, but is recency bias, especially in the heavyweight division. And the reason being is the heavyweight division constantly is teaching you lessons. Just look at Joseph Parker's recent run of form to be able to realise that, right? And when I look at the recency bias, I understand, right? Not only has AJ looked better in his last couple of fights than Fury's looked, there's also a mutual opponent in there that AJ's done a way better job on. When you actually look at the last 4 fights, I don't think, and you might argue this, I don't think there's a question about who's fought at a higher level in the last 4 fights. Last 4 fights for Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, Dillian Whyte, Derek Chisora, Francis Ngannou. They've both fought him, so let's write that one off. Let's look at AJ's other 3 opponents in those 4 fights. Jermaine Franklin, Robert Helenius, Otto Wallin. So if you're looking, you're disregarding Francis Ngannou, which I understand. It's a dangerous game to disregard him because AJ's got a better job done on him. If you go Wilder, White, Chisora, or Wallin, Helenius, Franklin, I think there's quite a gulf in difference. You can even look at them. You can even look at them comparatively and say, well, White beat Franklin just before. You know, when these guys have matched up against each other.
Okay, I'll go with you on this. White versus Franklin, close fight. A lot of people thought White was quite fortunate to get the win there. He looked like he was on the ropes at one point. So I think their levels are close.
Yep.
I'd put them around 45, 55, maybe lean towards White.
Yep.
Helenius or Chisora?
I mean, they fought and it was a very close fight once again.
Yeah.
You'd put them around the same level.
Same level. And what was the other one?
So then you're comparing Wallin and Wilder.
Yeah, I mean, you'd rather fight with Wallin.
I think what you've done there is showed that maybe I'm over exaggerating how vast the levels and opponents are.
I think they're close. And if we're talking about how they performed, it's a weird one, but I think the boxing. Here's the thing with Fury. I think his boxing IQ is so high, it's made him lazy. I think he was so in control of Chisora, was so in control of Dillian Whyte. And look, it's not just that he's IQ. He's massive and he has all of the physical advantages on these guys. Whereas I think AJ maybe makes harder work for himself sometimes. And I think actually what Ben's trying to do is make him be more of what he is. Instead of trying to box Franklin, I think if he fought Franklin again, we'd get a different version of AJ than what we did last time, completely. But yeah, I mean, what are you speculating? Do you think that the performances have been better from Fury than AJ?
I think that the Dillian Whyte performance wasn't as bad as maybe you're thinking. And I'm not saying you think it was awful, but
I don't think it was bad.
You were making a note that made it look like he was slowing down.
Played into the problem. I'm not even blaming Fury for it. I actually think if White had actually came in a bit like Ngannou did, with a bit more belief. I don't think White believed he was winning that fight from the second it started, mate.
No, it didn't look good, did it? Nah. There's obviously a skill to be able to nullify what someone's doing.
Yeah.
The Chisora fight, It was what it was, man. I always watched Tyson Fury, and I'm a fan of Tyson Fury. Did I want to see him fight Chisora for a third time? No, not at all. And there was obviously the sort of negotiations that went around that. Probably left a bit of a sour taste in people's mouth. I just think that I'm always trying to look for patterns, right? And you could probably use this argument against me if you were clever enough to do so, and I'm sure you could do that. But I always look for patterns, right? And Tyson Fury's career is littered with underwhelming performances. And I don't think that in a fight against Dillian Whyte, for example, that he won, a fight against Deontay Wilder, right, we can say about him getting dropped. Deontay Wilder, until Joseph Parker, had dropped every man he had ever been in a ring with anyway. And ultimately, that is, if I'm going to sit 10 years from now, if all the heavyweight division finishes now, and 10 years from now you can watch one fight and one fight only from the heavyweight division in that era, I'm going to go, I'll have Fury Wilder 3, please.
It was great.
And I think you'd do the same, right?
No, it was a fucking great fight.
So ultimately, it was a fucking great fight, you know, and he did get dropped and come back to win the fight. We've only seen AJ do that once. We've seen Tyson Fury do it quite a few times. So when I'm looking at the patterns in Tyson Fury's career, I would say that every 4 or 5 fights, you do see a real underwhelming, even a real close fight. The last one before Ngannou for Tyson Fury was obviously Otto Wallin. If I'm looking at patterns, we normally see that, and then we normally see a good Tyson Fury performance. So I personally believe that the next performance we see from Tyson Fury is going to be a good one. Win, lose or draw, I think it's going to be a good enough one for us to go, we want to see him in there with AJ next. And
I've got a counterpoint for the Fury thing. For me, Fury's great performance against Wilder 2 was his last great performance. And I'm talking about great performance. I was blown away by that, and I'll never take anything away from that. You can't argue with it. It was perfect. The third fight, he didn't come in shape. And he looked in that Wilder 3 fight like he's looked in every fight since then. Arguably, it was just worse shape against Ngannou, but that like puffier frame, the lack of footwork, the lack of, you know, the level of athleticism that we've been seeing in Wilder 2. But he got away with it against Whyte because Whyte was not in any way self-believing in that fight. And he was good enough to beat Whyte. It's, you know, there's no debate in that. Chisora, I actually didn't think he looked good in that fight. But again, who are you in there with? You're not in there with... And again, I think Ngannou exposed something that we'd seen for about four fights in a row, roughly. So for me, the question is this just Tyson Fury needs a rocket up him to make him wake up and go, you need to fucking train hard for this, you know? Just because you're bigger, taller, longer reach and cleverer doesn't mean you can just fucking turn up and phone it in. And the reality is he has been able to, but at the elite level, you can't just phone it in.
You've just literally said exactly what I think. You've just explained to the audience what I think is going on here, and I could be wrong. Like no one knows until they get in there and fight. That's exactly what I think.
But there's a possibility.
I think Tyson Fury needs a rocket up of him to really intensify things. And I think that when we look at his performances, of course, the stars would align and point at the fact that, okay, he's getting on now in age. He's had a lot of miles on the clock, a lot of tough fights, and that is why we're seeing little bits of dips in performance from him recently.
Where's the fear?
But for me, that's exactly it. I'm thinking, you know you can beat these guys.
How can you be scared of Deontay Wilder when you outclassed him in the second fight? How can you be scared of Derek Chisora when you've outclassed him twice? How can you be scared of Dillian Whyte when you've beaten him up in training? How can you be scared of Francis Ngannou when he's not a boxer? Those are the 4 fights in a row that he had where the motivation to get out of bed was clearly lacking, but he got away with it anyway. The question is, we might be wrong, and the other theory that I've presented in his body deteriorating may be also true. And I'm not saying, look, I don't think for 1 second we're going to see the same version as Ngannou against Usyk. I think we will see an improvement. But if the reasons are beyond his control as well, then he's fucked. You know what I mean? So that's where the excitement comes into it.
If that is the case, and it is very much a factor of the fear and maybe the the getting comfortable of people. Like, there was a time when every single person, 2 years ago, was saying Tyson Fury is the best, he's the best heavyweight of all time. And now the public perception has swung. The landscape's changed. Things have happened to be able to, as you say, put a bit of a rocket up Tyson Fury's arse. And because of all that, I'm banking on the fact that this is what's going to light that fire in him, and it's more so that than the deterioration that will happen to every fighter over time. I could very much be wrong.
I think you are wrong.
Yeah.
But the reason being is, as much as I think Tyson Fury hasn't been motivated, hasn't been all of those things, and I agree he could come back and do everything that you think he can do and win against Usyk. I think because other fighters have stayed focused, stayed dedicated, Usyk and AJ have lived their life, and I think that once upon a time, if Tyson Fury, let's say from Klitschko, had never gone off the deep end, I think maybe now we might be talking about him as the GOAT or one of the GOATs or whatever. But I just don't believe that you can be that out of shape, take the piss that much, and then come back after all these other elite athletes have stayed dedicated and go, actually, I'm going to try hard now. I just don't think it's going to be enough. I think, don't get me wrong, that cut's actually bought him even more time. So maybe, we see him running up and down fucking Morecambe Beach and all that, and he's clearly trying, but I just think it's going to be too little too late. And I think Usyk is all wrong for him. And I think AJ now, after watching the Ngannou versus AJ fight, looking at the problems Ngannou gave Fury, even if it was an off night and he just didn't try and all of that, I just think that AJ's showing enough to me to go, you bring a lot of those same problems Ngannou did, and then a good few more. And so I think Fury is number 3, but I can't prove that until we see it, right?
Yeah. For me, at the moment, people are I can hear the keyboard typing already. People are going to be jumping on me here. For me, at the moment, it would be, I want to say, a tied number 1 between Tyson Fury and Usyk.
Do you know why I don't think you can say that? Just honestly.
Go on.
Usyk's never drawn. He's won everything. And Fury has a draw. And that alone, it's just enough for me to go, based on that, no one's ever equaled Usyk.
Do you think it was a draw?
What, the fight? No. I don't think it was a draw. I think he was he won that fight. But if we're going on officially, that was what would make me say that.
If we're going on about controversy, though, in fights that have happened, a lot of people are pointing to the Usyk Dubois one. Not me. It's just worth mentioning
had his hand raised at the end.
Yeah. Listen, the beauty of it all is we're very soon going to find out, and the live stream will be happening on the Pain Game.
Oh, yeah, mate.
Or maybe the True Geordie main channel.
It's in May, not long away.
May, yeah.
May.
I'll be done with a fight. Hopefully, I won't be in another camp. Hopefully, I'll be sat around that table getting pissed with you. But until then, I'm sure we'll cover it all until it happens. Thank you very much, mate, for joining me again on another video. And also, by the time this video goes out, I should be a couple of days now, maybe 6 days or so, from my next fight on Misfits Boxing. Me against Baby Hulk in Nashville, Tennessee. The link for tickets is in the description to this video. So if you want to come along, have a beer with me after, head over, buy a ticket, and I'll see you all there. People, I'll see you in the next one.